Okay, it's time for our biblical leadership class. This is Christian Bible Chapel. This is Brother Harris, and we greet you this morning, this Thursday morning, for our biblical leadership class, Facebook and YouTube. By the way, if you're listening by means of any social media, please drop me a line at stharris1@gmail.com and let me know that you're listening. And if you have any questions concerning any of our lessons, give me a note. That's Saint, SAINT, Harris1@gmail.com. All right? Particularly you elders. If you think I'm doing a good job, if you think I'm not doing a good job, if you think I'm not doing enough of it, well, drop me a note. Let me know what's going on, how you feel about it, all right? Today we're having our two classes on the course Biblical Leadership, the importance of knowing the life and times of Jesus Christ before he came, during his visit, and even today, the life and times of Jesus Christ. We're looking at how we as leaders can respond better in our messages, even in our teaching, if we knew something more about the lifestyles, the times, the careers, the fashions, the social events and social things that was going on in work and all home life, marriages, and everything during the times of Jesus. This will help us when Jesus starts speaking, as we read his word, and especially his parables, we can better understand what he is talking about. We're in chapter 4 now. We're going to talk about village life. How did people live in villages, in Jewish towns? All right. When Mary and Joseph returned from Egypt, they went home to Nazareth, where Jesus grew and became strong. This is Luke chapter 3 and 4, according to Luke. As a young boy, Jesus observed country ways, from which he drew many images for his later teachings. So you see, it's good to learn about the lifestyles, what's going on in the times of Jesus Christ. In the first century AD, the vast majority of people in Galilee lived in rural villages where farming determined every aspect of their daily lives. Now, I said people lived in Galilee. Week before last, I think last week we gave you a test, a home assignment, to find out certain rivers and seas and places. And one of them was Galilee and the River Jordan. If you did your home assignment, you would know when we come across these words as Galilee. Their traditional habits and the holy days and belief. Such a place was Nazareth, Jesus' boyhood home, high in a shelter base some 1,300 feet above sea level. The hills surrounding Nazareth are a part of limestone ridge that define the southernmost border of Lower Galilee. From the summit above the village, the view west to Mount Carmel on the Mediterranean coast, east to nearby Mount Tabor, and north to distant snow-covered Mount Hermon. South of Nazareth stretches the fertile land of Astoria. Its gentle terrain and strategic location made it a battleground of conquerors and a road cross of trade and travel for the early times. The caravan route from Egypt, which hugged its flat coastlines, was probably the one Mary and Joseph traveled with the young Jesus on their way back home, following the death of King Herod. After having spent some time on the road and hiding out in a foreign land, Mary and Joseph must have been eager to return their family and friends and get back to the comfort of their home and the carpenter's shop. And let me show you a picture here. And if you have your book, that even greater. But this is a picture of the home life. Let me get it right here. Okay, you notice the trade that's going on, and in the marketplace, in the village. Some sons stick by their fathers and helping out in carpentry, while the merchants and the business people on the side inside the marketplace sell their goods. They will have farming, and that was a dominant part, farming and shepherding. And then whatever they farmed and whatever they grew as animals, sheep and other animals, they will bring it to the marketplace here and they will sell their goods to the people. All right. Nazareth was an unbelievable country, city, which a lot of people look down upon. You know how you have some cities that have certain areas within their city is very run down. It's like slummish. It's not taken care of. And, and Nazareth was that particular type of place. But Nazareth was really rich in soil and resources. Okay? The people of the lower Galilee, though most residents in Galilee in Jesus' times were Jews, a number of Gentiles, both slave and free, lived among them. Right? They were Syrians who had migrated from the north, the Greeks who had moved in after the conquest of Alexander the Great, and Romans who had arrived after the middle of the 1st century BC. The Jews were fairly small in stature, relatively light-skinned, not white, light-skinned. Okay, they were nonetheless deeply tanned most of the year as a result of lifetime spent out of doors. The Jews were not, if you look at the biblical Jews, as many Jews, they are not what we see on TV, like Charleston Heston. I mean, can you imagine the Egyptians going around looking for Moses when he killed that man? And if Moses was the only white guy, okay, in the area, of course they're going to spot him. So the Jews were kind of light-skinned people of a colored race. All right, and their strong faces were always framed with dark brown or black hair, which was worn long by both men and women. Following tradition, most of the men wore beards. The Galileans, they spoke Aramaic dialect that sound crude and uncultured to those with education in Greek. And they were considered to be unsophisticated by the Jerusalemites. The stern religious rulers or leaders of Jerusalem, they distrust the Jews from Galilee. Remember that saying from the scriptures when they said, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? So Nazareth wasn't, and then Galilee too, I mean, those two places, whew. All right, but people lived there, and they loved that. All right. Galilean social life centered on the family. Rural families tend to be large, cohesive, extremely hardworking, and such was probably true of Jesus' kinmen and neighbors. The husband was the spiritual and legal head of the household. He was the final arbiter of all issues dealing with the welfare of the wife and the children. A woman may well have called her husband Baal, Lord, or Adon, Master. In return, of course, the husband bore the responsibility for feeding, protecting, and sheltering his family. Right? Under the law, his wife if the wife found no favor in his eyes because he had found some indecency in her. That's Deuteronomy chapter 24 and 1. A husband could give her a bill of divorcement if the indecency stopped short of adultery. All right? what that means, I don't want to we discussed this in marriage counseling on Mondays and Christian counseling on Mondays, dealing with different family issues, social issues, spiritual issues. But here, I'm reading it because that's the lifestyle or the family life in those days. Indecency, number one, means that the man caught his wife in adultery or fornication. But it could be that the wife keep going out of the house, exposing herself, all right, and dressing up like a prostitute or looking like a harlot in those days. That's the metaphoric figure of Scripture in 1 Timothy chapter 2. Gold, pearl, costly array, her hair braided. And see, only prostitutes and harlots who wanted to attract men put seashells, broken seashells and pearls and whatever jewelry, whether it's fake or real, in their hair and tied their hair up a certain way with pins and this and that and go out to solicit men or vice versa. All right? And that's indecency to the husband. He would tell his wife, stop that, don't do that. That's you embarrassing me, embarrassing the family. You're making yourself look like, okay? So that's one of the reasons the husbands back then would give their wife a bill of divorcement. And of course, Jesus cleared that up from the Pharisees, because before even the Pharisees came on board, long before the Pharisees came, they had corrupted the law in Deuteronomy 24, wherein in Deuteronomy 24 and 1 and 2, the word indecency is only one word in the Hebrew, fornication, adultery, but by the time the scribes gave legiancy, they lowered the standard and allowed for the husband, for any cause, to divorce his wife. That's why the Pharisees, when they came to Jesus in Matthew chapter 19 and other parts of the scriptures, can a man write a bill of divorce for anything? Jesus says no, because whosoever look upon a woman, and so it's an adultery. Okay, all right. All village Jews were governed by the same system of moral, religious, and social codes. Husbands has clearly established obligations to their wives and wives to their husbands. Children were instructed early to honor their parents. Parents knew with certainty what their duties to their children were. And that should be today too. And every important event in Nazarene's life, from birth to marriage to parenthood to death, had its proper time, its innumerable rules and rituals, many of them involving prayer. For example, many Jews recited a blessing for nearly every occasion, including waking up, dressing, lacing their sandals, and washing their hands. Let's look at the family home in the days of Jesus, the life and times of Jesus. Parents and young children, unmarried adults, and married sons and their spouses might all live under one small roof with little or no privacy and very little material comfort to ease their lives. This brings in, you see, this is the reason why we need to have an understanding of the life and times of Jesus Christ as ministers, elders, and teachers. See, what I just read, enforces John 14 and 2. All right? In my Father's house are many mansions. See, that's the enforcement. Let me read this again. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. This is John 14 and 2, right? Now, I'm going to read my lesson again. Parents, young children, unmarried adults, married sons, and their spouses might all live under one small roof and with little or no privacy and very few material comforts to ease their lives. In my Father's house. See, when a person got married in the time of Jesus, they didn't go down Jordan. They didn't go down to the base down Jerusalem. They stayed in Nazareth in their father's house. And if it wasn't room, they built another room attached to the father's house. And then when each son got married, they attached. In my Father's house are many mansions. This is the ideal that Jesus was talking about. See how it's important, and it's the same thing. Remember I said that they were shepherds, right? And remember I showed you the picture of the shepherds, and the sons helped their fathers being carpenters, if the father was a carpenter. And in the marketplace, they were shepherds, they were farmers, carpenters, artists, pottery, they, pots and pans and vases and things. They did that, for a living. Remember now when John chapter 10, let me turn to that, all right? The Gospel of John chapter 10. Just trying to pull out some illustrations here so you can better equate with what I'm saying here. Okay, here it is. In John chapter 10, it says, "He that entered not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbed up some other way, the same as a thief and a robber. But he that entered in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the porter opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and calleth the sheep by name." Now, if you was a shepherd back in those days, it was your responsibility from day to day to make sure at the ending closing of the day, which you would know, and how long it would take to get to a sheltered place. Now, that sheltered place consists of a high wall with only one way to get in and one way to get out. It may have a door and it may not have a door. These places were scattered throughout Jordan for shepherds, for those who had goats, and any flock of animals. Before it got dark, before the sun set, before the next, it's 6 o'clock the next day, 12 hours in a day, the shepherd, the person the head shepherd would lead the flock with the other shepherds helping him, lead the flock to this place of a high wall and one door or opening. And he will go in. He said, see, he that entered not by the door into the sheepfold. See, the sheep, it was called a sheepfold, whether it was small or big, and a high wall. If it did not have a door, each shepherd took turns in guarding the entrance from the wolf or thief that will come in. Okay? Also, they had guards around that took cycle watch over the wall, because there were some wolves, foxes, thieves will climb over the wall. See, this is a perfect illustration of John chapter 10. Okay? To him, but he that entered by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the porter opens, and the sheep hear his voice. Porter, shepherd, same thing. All right? The porter was part of the band of men that helped guard the flock. There was a shepherd who also acted as a porter, right? But he was the shepherd. Most likely he was the owner or the person put in charge of that flock to get it to its destination. All right? When he putteth forth his sheep, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. The leading porter or the leading shepherd, each one had their own unique voice that their sheep only hears and obey. So when they meet other flocks of sheep, and they gathered for water, or they gathered for grazing of the grass, and it was time for your particular flock to go, you will utter a certain words or sound that only your sheep could know. All right? And that's the illustration here in John chapter 10 and 4. When he putteth forth his own sheep, he goeth before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. A stranger they will not follow, but will flee from him, for they know not the voice of a stranger. This parable Jesus spake unto them, but they didn't understand. They didn't understand what things were to which he spoke of. Now, it's my guess that many of the disciples didn't understand was because maybe they didn't understand the duties and the responsibility of a shepherd or the people, and maybe in the area where Jesus was at this time, they wasn't dominated by shepherds and things like that. Well, who knows? Okay, but they didn't understand. All right. Anyway, it's not a matter of understanding that what Jesus was talking about is that they knew every time Jesus spoke in a natural realm, they knew it had some significant meaning to it. That's possibly what John was saying in verse 6, but they understood not what things they were which he spake unto them. So he had to give them an all-inclusive what he was saying from verses 7 and following. Okay? All right, back to our reading here. So they was in all one roof, under one roof, in one place, maybe sectioned off, not for the whole family, but only for that individual family, if the son got married and had his own. While the better houses, see, there were other houses. Some homes were condensed, poor, that everybody had one or two rooms, and that was it. And you slept and ate and did whatever you did in those two rooms. But there were better houses, especially in the larger cities, were likely to be made of stone, encompassing several rooms and perhaps 2 stories with a flat roof. Okay? And made out of mud brick, consisting of just 1 or 2 all-purpose rooms. So you had 2 all-purpose rooms, plus there was other rooms. Then you had a roof, and it was flat. It was a flat roof. When it got hot, you went on top of that roof, and you sort of cool off there, or you had a teaching place up there, or you had a meeting place up there, or you ate up there. Okay? Doorways were narrow, low, forcing a man to bend slightly when entering. So there wasn't no such thing as a 6 feet, 7 feet door like we have today. It was like 5 something. Okay? Because, see, remember, the Jewish people back in those days were little stature. There wasn't midgets or small people, but they wasn't giants. So it was surprised that when Saul came and he was big, they said, wow. Matter of fact, Saul, you the one should be out there going and face Goliath because you're taller than anybody in the whole tribe, all 12 tribes. Okay? Thought I'd throw that out there for you guys who reading the Old Testament there. Okay? The houses of the rich may have locks and keys. Okay? Again, it wasn't a lock and key like we got. Okay? You know how our keys, what we got, it was different. It wasn't even a skeleton key. All right? See, we got to move our imagery of Hollywood and the movies on TV, like they had doors and everybody had hinges on their door. No, it wasn't like that. They had these little things, if you can see it on the video here, and it was bolted to the stone when they made the house out of mud and brick. And it was fastened to the house, to that particular opening. So when they ready to put the door in, they attach that lumber, onto the door, or they put something in front of the door and put a big long wood on, and it clunked right in and guarded the door. So they had one up front and one in the top, or some just put one in the middle, that wooden beam. All right. All right. And as animals was often kept in part of the house at night, okay, interiors were often designed with 2 levels. Now, they didn't have Febreze and candlesticks, light scented candlesticks, okay? So animals sleeping overnight, you can imagine, okay? The lower portion to the shelter animals in a raised portion, perhaps 18 inches higher, where the family ate and slept away from the domestic animals, the beasts. So even though there was one big area, 2 places dividing everything, they did kind of section it to bring in the animals from the storm or the cold or whatever the case may be. If it was pleasant outside, the animals stayed outside with a guard, with one of the members of the family taking turns watching the sheep, because again, thieves would come and take the sheep. Except in rich households, there was little in the way of furniture. Bedding was all but non-existent. They didn't have beds like we had. All right? Furniture like we had, a table and chairs. See, the rich may have somewhat similar to what we got today, but not all out what we have. Family members usually stretched out on mats on the floor, right? Covering themselves with tunics or cloaks. Personal possessions, too, were scant. An entire family total material wealth might be fit in a single chest, so there was no need for many storage cabinets and closets. The kitchen consists of an oven. And now, the majority of the ovens were outside, okay? And but some could be inside. But you have to be aware that when it's cooking, the wood and the coal or whatever they use for the oven, you have to regulate that now. The kitchen consists only of an oven, some pottery, and a few utensils, and a stock of stored food. The only light in the house came from the dim glow of oil lamps, which were perched on wall niches, okay, or on shelves or stands. Now, niches. It was, when the house was made out of brick and mortar or brick and mud, every now and then a little gap or like a hole was, like a shelf was left open, large enough for a candle to be put in there, okay, to keep far as to light up that particular room. There were no bathrooms. Matters of personal toilet, washing, for example, were done in the courtyard or in the street. See, you city folks don't know nothing about that. See, when we lived in Virginia, the bathroom, the outhouse, was a couple of yards from the front door. And you had to, get up in the morning, early in the morning, or any time you had to go to the bathroom. Pull up your pajamas, whatever you had on, and just hold on to it and walk out the steps, and crickets, and all the frogs doing this, and everybody, all kind of weird sounds late at night, early morning, or whenever you decide to go to the bathroom. And you would go there, open the door, close the door, and sit on that box, which had a toilet seat, but it was a big box, and you took care of your business as if it wasn't no flush. Everything just fell in a deep hole. And that's how it was in those days, okay? Of course, we got flush toilets and all that kind of stuff now. But back in Jesus' days, that's similar to what people on the old farm time, back in the 60s and 50s, before there were modernized pipes and water coming from the house, and they put the toilet into the house then, see. But back then, there was no bathroom. Right? You had to do everything from the courtyard or in the street, where the discharged water was steamed away without turning the dirt floor of the house into a bed of mud. Everything was done right now. Right? The roof of the house was generally flat. Right? To make it, brushwood branches were woven together and laid on rafters and then covered with a thick layer of clay filled with spaces that filled the spaces between the branches and form a smooth, hard layer of plaster to keep the roof from falling away. Now, I'm going to show you a picture of the sectional houses that looks like, well, to me, it looks like pictures of an old ghetto. What I mean by ghetto is clusters of houses. That's the word ghetto. It's clusters of houses where people were jammed together without any privacy or anything. Then I will show you on the other side a stove that was outside the house, built out of brick and clay, and the mother or the woman will be grinding early in the morning for the meals, for the lunch, for breakfast, lunch, and whatever time they had to eat. All right, let me show you these pictures. Okay. All right. So to my right here is the village, cramped houses made out of clay and mud, jammed together. And that's how they live. Then over here to my left here is the woman working outside, and let me there you go. There you go. Okay, you see how she's she's sitting down, relaxing, and taking care of business in the kitchen. And that was the kitchen area outside the house. Okay, and let me show you the other picture closely. All right. So these are things that's good to know. It's good to know these things. It's good to know. So you can better acquaint as you come across the routine. As you come across the scriptures, you see what's going on. Of course, there was spinning and making clothes. There were fun and games by the children, and they had a good time and everything. And the women would spin, when a good wife put her hand to the distaff and spindle, as Proverbs tells us in Proverbs chapter 31 and other passages of scripture. She made coats and gowns. She made things for her husband and what have you, and tunics, robes. The tunic, sometimes the outer garment would have the tunics. See, what is a tunic? A tunic is like an outer garment that a man wore, okay? And it would have tied with a leather belt or cloth about 4 inches wide around his waist, and that would hold it together. The girdle might have had a double section stitch for the purpose of hiding a purse inside there. Okay, a man wearing only his tunic was said to be naked. So you see, you had on you possibly what we call underpants, or it wasn't that back then called underpants as a man or a woman. And sometimes you didn't wear anything; you just had the tunic thrown over your head, like like the Mexicans have that thing that you put a hole in a blanket and just put over you. Back in Jesus' days, it was a tunic that you put over, and you had a belt made out of leather or whatever material, and you tied it, and it was 4 inches wide, so you could put money or hide something in there. And if you came out of the house without that tunic, you was considered naked. Okay, see, men and women wore something that was under their tunic, something similar to what we call like a diaper, if you understand what I'm saying, like a diaper. All right, and it clothes your genital parts in the body, in the bottom, nothing for the top for the women or men, just the midsection of the body. And then over that, you had the tunic. And it was like, it wasn't a robe. See, the robe was put over top of the tunic. Okay? And there's a lot of stuff they carried back in the day. See, the more clothes you wear back in those days, the cooler you were. Okay? And that's the men, sometimes they dress this way while working. Okay? So when you read in the scriptures how that, especially in John 21 and other passages of scripture, that when a man ran out of the house and they tore his tunic, tore his clothes off, that means they tore his they tore his robe off, but he had a tunic. And that's when the scripture says he was naked. To come out the house with just a tunic. Let me give you a good example of that. To come out the house with just pajamas on, back in Jesus' days, was considered naked. Okay? Actually, if you came out naked, bare naked. See, we get the idea that the word naked in Jesus' time is when they saw your whole body, flesh, everything. That wasn't the case. Nakedness in the time of Jesus, like the man that was in the cave who was possessed with a demon, he would come out and he was naked. That word means that he had a tunic on. He wasn't bare naked. He had something on, whether it was raggedy or whatever. He had a partially stripped, dirty tunic on. And whether it was clothed in or tightened up, I doubt that. But it looked like a blanket or whatever with a hole in it, and he just threw it over himself, and he just came out the cave and, convulsion and doing all, hollering like a wolf. And that's the story in the Gospel of Mark. He was naked, cutting himself. Okay? So that's why we're going through Jesus and his times, the life and times of Jesus, so we can be, as elders and teachers, better acquainted with the Word of God. Now, next week, we're going to come back and look at the days, how the children played, the games they played, about the Sabbath day, the holy days, the land, how it was fertilized, kept farming and things like that, the tools that they lived, and a little bit discussion about village life and everything. And of course, we're going to end it with how the marriage and raising children back in Jesus' days, before Jesus came and after Jesus came. All right? We thank the Lord. Get the book, Jesus and his times. Okay? And when you get the book, we'll be in chapter 3, Village Life. All right? Okay. Let's move on to our second class. Our second class, okay, we're not going to be too long with you, about half an hour. We're going to look at the InterTestament Period, its significance upon Christianity. All right? We noticed the InterTestament Period was called the 400 years of silence, wherein it wasn't silence. God was still moving. We think he didn't say anything, but God even had a particular plan in those years. Now, what happened in those 400 years? By the time from John the Baptist all the way back up to possibly Esther during the Persian Empire, that's the time of Esther, what actually took place? Well, In order to get the understanding, we'll combine both biblical and secular history because they do agree on this. And anytime science, biology, and other sciences, not scientists, but science itself agree with the scriptures, we can shake our heads and say amen. All right. Last week we talked about 6 dominant periods of rule or eras that took place during this 400 years before John the Baptist came on the scene. The Persian Empire, or the Persian era, the Greek era, the Egyptian era, the Syrian era, the Maccabean era, and then last, the Roman era. All right, now, the first one, I don't know if we covered this, but we're going to highlight it again, okay? The first era is the Persian era, beginning 397 to 336 BC. All right. This era actually dates back to Persia's conquering Babylon. And you remember now, the last king of Babylon, which was Belshazzar, that's the one that saw the writing on the wall in the book of Daniel, right? He boasts that Babylon was invincible and no one could come in and attack because of its beautiful walls, high scaling walls, all right? And there was a lot of features about Babylon that some of the features became some of the 7 wonders of the world. And some of those wonders of the world was at Babylon. Right? But that was not the case, because the Persians, the Medo-Persians, soon found a way that night to go under the walls of the great, massive built wall of the Babylon, and come under the wall and let the soldiers through, and came in that night and conquered Babylon. Now, that particular history is not in the Bible, but it's secular history and it's of truth. Okay, it's secular history and it was of truth. And Babylon fell in 536 BC. Okay. So the first thing Persia contributed to the people of Israel was a foreign policy. You need to remember the history of the people of Israel. Once Solomon goes off the scene, the kingdom was split into 2 kingdoms, Judah and Israel. Both of these kingdoms eventually are taken out of the land and made subject to foreign entities. First, it was the Israelites that fell to the Assyrians. The Israelites were up to the north. That's the northern kingdom. Okay, that was consist of 10 tribes. They are constantly in rebellion and ignoring the law of God, letting the land lay for every 70 years, let it lay. And they ignored the laws of God, the Sabbath laws of the land. They started worshiping false gods and doing things contrary to Jehovah God. God allowed the northern tribes to be brought under the dominion of the Persian Empire. Later on, the Babylonians, who conquered the Assyrians, all right, did something with the southern tribes, which was only 2 tribes, okay, Judah and Benjamin. And they took them out. And you have to remember that the emperors of Babylon, well, Nebuchadnezzar, put it that way, set up 3 sieges. 3 times he came, and the 3rd time he came, he put out the eyes of Jehoiakim, and he killed his sons, and then put his eyes out. And of course, he left some people in Jerusalem. But he burnt down the walls. He burnt and knocked down the walls, burnt and knocked down the temple and things like that. Right? Persia eventually conquered Babylonia, and when they do, their foreign policies lets the people of Judah return to their homeland under Cyrus. So Ezra and Nehemiah, we have people who have been in exile returning home. With the foregoing in mind, Persia was a strong influence over the Jewish people. See, every time the Jewish people got conquered by these different 6 eras of empires and people, they sort of fell in line with their policies, their beliefs, and their way of life, which was detrimental to their faith in God. Okay? With the foregoing in mind, Persia was a strong influence over the Jewish people for some 200 years, 536 to 336 BC. God used Persia to deliver Israel from the Babylonian captivity, Daniel chapter 5, verse 30 and 31, and allowed the Jewish exile to return back to their land. These are significant things that the Persia elected Israelites do, and it's all related to that foreign policy that let them return to their land. If they did not rebel, actually let them pretty much govern themselves. For about 100 years after the close of the Old Testament canon, 425 BC, Judah continued to be a Persian territory under the governor of Syria, with the high priests exercising a measure of civil authority. The Jewish people were allowed to observe their religious tenets without any outside governmental interference. Persia's attitude was tolerant towards the Jewish remnant in Palestine until internal rivalry over the political powerful office of the high priest results in partial destruction of Jerusalem by the Persian governor. Other than that, the Jewish people was pretty much left undisturbed by Persia during this period. Number 2, the Greeks. The Greek era from 336 to 323 BC. See, we're moving closer and closer to the ending of BC, that by the time of Pompey and Julius Caesar and the birth of Christ, which then becomes AD, or in the year of our Lord, or common era, put it that way. Between 334 BC and 331 BC, Alexander the Great defeated the Persian king Darius III in 3 decisive battles that gave him control over the land of the Persian Empire. In many respects, Alexander the Great has been regarded by historians as perhaps the greatest conqueror of all time. He was far and away the central figure to this brief period. I mean, he not only conquered and took over what Persia took over Babylon, and Babylon took over Assyria. So that's Assyria, Babylon, and Persia. See, all that landmass that all those 3 past empires had, Alexander the Great expanded greatly and had control of all of that area. Alexander the Great. He conquered Persia, Babylon, Palestine, Syria, Egypt, as well as Western India. Although he only reigned over Greece for 13 years, he died at the age of 33. His influence lived long after him. The cherished desire of Alexander was to found a worldwide empire unified by language, custom, and civilization. So those are the 3 things he unified. What? Language, custom, and civilization. And he did that greatly, massively. And he succeeded in each one of these areas. The impact of Alexander the Great, he influenced the world at that time. In the process of time, it was called Hellenization. And it flooded the world so that it wasn't even erased when Rome took over. later on. When Rome took over, the Greek language and a lot of their beliefs and cultures and ways migrated right into the Roman culture without any problem. Let me go ahead and read. The entire world, Western world, began to speak and study the Greek language. This process, as I said earlier, was called Hellenization, including the adoption of Greek culture and religion in all parts of the world. Hellenism became so popular that it persisted and was encouraged even through the Roman era and the New Testament times. And see, you would think that the Romans would say everybody learn Latin. No, only the well-educated, the rich, and those in politics spoke and dealt with Latin. Not that the other people didn't know Latin, but the majority of the language during the Roman Empire was Greek. Yeah. The struggle had developed between the Jews and Hellenism influence upon their culture and religion was long and bitter. Alexander, however, permitted the Jews to observe their laws and granted them an exemption from taxes during their sabbatical year. It was Alexander's goal to bring Greek culture to the lands he had conquered. He wished to create a world united by Greek language and thinking. This is the crucial element that Greece brought to the table. They brought a Greek culture that is both educated and a multi-god worshiping culture. Thus, there were many gods in the land. They brought in magic and an onslaught of mystery religions. That ties in on that Bible class, Wednesday, Thursday night Bible class, dealing with the great whore church. Read about it. So the religious impact was big on hand. Perhaps the most important impact Greece had outside of culture was that they brought Greek language. And that language eventually became the language of the land. People actually became bilingual, and bilingual means that you're able to speak more than one language. You know, you get that you see that on the application. Are you bilingual? Can you speak Spanish and English, or Spanish and Greek, or Spanish and Russian, or English and French, or English and Spanish? Bilingual. So a lot of people spoke more than one language, okay? And people actually became bilingual in a very short period of time. Ultimately, this policy was dangerous to the religion of Israel because the Greek way of life was attractive, sophisticated, and humanly appealing, but utterly ungodly. Read 1 Corinthians and learn about the Corinthians. Paul says, you Corinthians, you Gentiles were carried about with idols. 1 Corinthians chapter 12. Wow. Faithful Jews staunchly resisted the strong influence of pagan polytheism. Polytheism, the word poly means many. Theism means gods or God. Many gods. Theism, polytheism. Although the Greek language was sufficiently widespread by 270 BC and resulted in the bringing about a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. See, the Hebrew Bible is the Old Testament. It was put in Greek. It's called the Septuagint. Okay? And we'll deal with that more later on. The Septuagint. Now, Alexander the Great died. All right? And when he died, his 4 generals divided the empire into 4 parts. All right? And we're going to get into that next week. But When Alexander died, that's when the Egyptian era started from 323 to 198 BC. And because this is massive, a lot of um, understanding, I'm not going to get into it. I'm just going to stop here that it was divided into four segments under his four generals, Ptolemy, Lastamachus, Cassander, and Selenos. I'm not pronouncing these Greek words right, but you get the picture. All right. So next week we're going to pick up with the third one, which is the Egyptian era, which lasts from 323, the death of Alexander the Great, until 198. Antiochus Epiphanes was in this bunch of generals, family line of generals that took over the Grecian Empire into these four sections. Okay, and we thank the Lord. We thank you. So next Thursday, Lord's willing, morning, evening, we let you know. We'll put a fly out there to let you know whether the class will be in the morning or the evening. We're going to come back talking again with Jesus in his times, and we're going to look at a lot of very important parts that'll help us how Jesus and the disciples before and during his time lived, walked, how they lived, how they dressed, how they ate, how they lived, career and everything, to better formulate and help us to preach and teach the words of Jesus. And then we're going to look again at the second class, the InterTestament Period, and its significance upon Christianity. This is Biblical Leadership. My name is Brother Sherman. Again, if you want the notes and if you want a book that we're studying from, drop me a line, stharris1@gmail.com. I'll get it for you. And everything is free. We'll mail it right to you, and everything is free. And God bless. Hope to see you next Thursday in our class. And, of course, Tuesday, Biblical Leadership class Tuesday. Thank the Lord.